So, Lise, today's podcast.
We're going to talk about, and it was a nice little title we gave it, which is Unwrapping Nostalgia. So we're going to talk about the comeback and our own experiences of retro packaging.
Absolutely. And this is something that's close to many people's hearts and not just people within our industry either. If you talk to anyone about sort of old packs that evoke memories in them, they will sit down and wax lyrical for ages about sort of packaging and designs, mainly about TV advertising, but sometimes I go into the finer details of the packs.
And I think it's interesting. We spoke about this back in COVID times when we were talking about trends. And probably towards the tail end of COVID, we talked a lot about nostalgia and retro and how a lot of brands were releasing nostalgic packaging. I've got my Barbie hoodie sweatshirt on today because old things that we remember from our childhood coming back, and they were recreating this memory in us that we felt happy about, even though the world was at the time in chaos. So I think we saw a huge rise in nostalgic packaging during COVID, and then I think it's just continued. I think maybe it's also an age and a generational thing. It takes us to a time we used to have, but also that we've seen a lot, and we can talk a little bit about it, about the brands that we love and what are they still doing today that remind us of releasing our inner child a little bit too. You
Absolutely.
went to the Museum of Packaging at the weekend, Mark.
I did.
Tell us about that.
In preparation for this, I just wanted to cover quickly nostalgia, because it's something which I looked into a little bit. I thought, well, where is this packaging nostalgia come from? Because whilst we've worked on packs in the past which have sort of a bit of heritage about them, and you try and evoke some of that heritage design and put it into the sort of the design concept you're producing. Nostalgia itself is something which I was looking into. You know how Google now brings up the AI summary of what you're looking for rather than going straight into the Google hits, which I've read recently that a lot of people who do a lot of work on Google getting a bit frustrated with that this AI is getting involved and not necessarily quoting the right things. So what I'm about to say might not be very true, but it's Googled. I'll say, but the effects of nostalgia on the brain are so potent that they were studied in the 17th and 18th centuries, and it was treated as a psychological disorder because of the way it fires up these things in your brain, sort of, I guess, excitement, if you like. Whilst we don't see it as a disorder now, nostalgia packs are something which brands have been working on for many years. I remember starting out in and I'm pretty sure I wrote an article on LinkedIn about 15, 16 years ago on nostalgia packs and how it's making a bit of a hit. People have been doing it for decades, if not centuries, producing designs which evoke memories of the past and in order to try and attract customers who've got a history with that brand. So yes, you're right. Going back to last Friday, in preparation for our pod, I had a meeting there, but I thought I'd make the most of it and to go have a mooch around as well at the Museum of Brands, which is a museum of branding and packaging that was set up by Robert Opie in 84, I think. So it's been going for quite some time. Robert Opie's, some people who may not know, he's a historian who is a collector of British memorabilia or British sort of branding and packaging, and has this museum in Notting Hill, which is just in Ladbroke Grove, is his nearest tube station. So if you get an opportunity to go there, you can spend a couple of hours there. You can spend all day there. It's brilliant. But you have this walk around of probably packs and marketing, advertising, which start from about the, let's say, early 1900s, probably a little bit earlier, but then go through the decades throughout the 20th century and into the more recent years. But there's a little bit of everything in there, just a little bit snapshots of time, which they could bring so many memories. Certainly when you start stepping into your own childhood, you start to see some memories, not just packaging. There's sort of, to a certain extent, there's Star Wars packaging, for example. So from the late 70s, early 80s. And you start to, when your early memories of what you were seeing in stores and what used to really excite you, Monster Munch packaging, stuff that you can, as a child, you think, I remember the feeling of opening up crisp packets and looking at the packaging and looking at these little really weird illustrated characters and what they meant. And then you see them on television to start to sort of make this connection. So this is the early stages of Mark Gray, packaging designer, sort of moving forward to where it is today. So yeah, the museum is fascinating. It's something I recommend anyone to go to if you just want to trip down memory lane more than anything. But it has, sorry, it's gone.
I was going to say, I said it's such a fascinating place. So it would have been over 10 years ago that I went there. And it's interesting we're talking about nostalgia, but I went there and took my mum And obviously she's not design, she's in no way, design related, but even to watch her look at the packs that were in there from her childhood and to go together. So I think if anyone is going to go there, like, you can take your parents or your siblings or whatever, because it really is a trip down memory lane. I do remember there was one pack, I don't know if it was there when you went the other day, but there used to be a brand called Matey Bubble Bath. And as
Yes.
a kid, I can remember having that in a bath, and my mum would pour it in, and it made the best bubbles ever in the bath. But the actual bottle was shaped like it was like a sailor,
That's it.
and
Yeah.
the top of it. So, and I remember very fondly going there with my mum, and my mum going, "Oh, look, you used to have this in the bath." And it just, all of those memories, those fondness, that you have from your childhood, or from your own kids, if you kind of go with kids or parents and things like that. Like, it's just such a beautiful place. I feel like they've probably done it up since I went, because everything was
Yeah, it's
crammed
done to
in there.
yeah.
Great place.
It is. They have exhibitions there, and they have meeting spots. And this isn't an advert for a museum of brands, but I'd certainly recommend anyone to go. I don't know what it was. I think it's £11.50 for one person to go in. So, and then sure there's reductions for concessions for
Students
all those
and seniors.
in fact, there was I think a school of American students walking through at the time. And I did think, because it is focused around British packaging.
Yeah.
But some of the Americans, I'm guessing they were marketing or advertising or branding students. But I was intrigued to I was listening to some of the conversations, what they were looking at, what they were finding the most interesting. And it was brands which they can relate to back from then. They can see Kellogg's cereal packaging. So, look, there's a Kellogg stuff. A little bit of Hershey chocolate, but it's obviously a lot of Cadbury's in there. In fact, confectionery plays a big part, I think. And certainly as a child, your memories probably evoke back to Mars, Snickers, or Marathon bars, and Opal fruits, Starbursts, those sorts of things. But there's quite a bit, and I don't know whether we want to go into listing a couple of packs which we look back to and have very fond memories of. But you touched on it, there are some brands which we've spoken about recently that have done this a lot. They've rebranded themselves recently to a point where they've actually had to make a big, heavy nod back to their past and their own heritage, Cadbury's being one of them. And I think you mentioned before some of the Burger King and some others.
I think things like Coke and stuff like that, I was trying to think about how some of those classic brands have attacked it from like modern functionality. So I think they still feel like old, but they're done for new. Pringles was the bigger one that, the old Mr. Pringles man has evolved, but actually the packaging format has changed and it doesn't have the plastic lids on it anymore, because we're trying to remove plastic, but it still feels like Pringles. Coke bottles, they obviously went to plastic bottles, now we're removing plastic. So they've actually gone all the way back to, and I imagine Coke was in that, I feel like it was in that museum as well. And so the old glass bottles are making a comeback because they're more sustainable in some ways. So I think some of those, the other one I was thinking of the other day was Smarties. So can you remember Smarties used to be in the tube with the plastic end, and then over time they've evolved. I don't even know if they still make Smarties because I don't buy sweets. But they became in a cardboard tube. But at one point they made them hexagonal. I don't know if they're still hexagonal.
You're right.
So there was those kind of things. You go, I don't know if it's the same, and you can't collect the coloured lids anymore. So someone like us,
even with my kids, they're very popular. So Smarties is still a brand which is around and still extremely popular. Absolutely.
And they're the only ones that the orange ones had orange chocolate in. And the rest were just regular chocolate.
I think that's still the case, actually.
Because there was a time.
They always taste the same. They always taste the same.
The orange ones have like Terry's chocolate. They have orange chocolate inside. Because there was a time I remember as a kid where they released orange Smarties, where all of them were orange. It was like a limited edition. I think they were called blue Smarties, but they all had orange insides.
Yeah, Quality Street.
So we'll have to Google that one, the blue Smarties.
Yeah,
if you're
blue Smarties, that's all of the
E
numbers, and people saying, don't give the blue ones to your kids, they'll go mental. They'll be running around for hours. Yeah, going back to the Cadbury's is a big one. And I know recently they had a big campaign, which, again, not to their own history. I think Cadbury's was celebrating 200 years of producing chocolate, and they produced a number of different packs that they'd launched all at the same time. I think 6 or 7 different packs, which all had a slightly different look about them from different periods of history. But the whole tie-in was the gold and the purple and a little bit of white in there, and that sort of half a glass of milk goes into every, or maybe the glass doesn't necessarily go across the full range of packs, but nonetheless you can see the consistency and what they're sort of saying is we've been going 200 years and we're still going strong, and look hasn't changed that much.
But also what Cadbury's have done really well with their marketing, their advertising, as well as their packaging, is tap into human emotion. So they touch those points in your life, or the packaging they've just brought out over here. It's obviously might be different in different countries. Is the one where it talks about tradition, but it said here's a pack for, and you can write who it's for. So you can write the name. Maybe this years ago we were designing packs,
Yes.
going, oh, you should make it personalized. So it allows you to put for my dad or for my
Yeah.
mate or for whoever's name it is. So they're doing that here at the moment. Obviously means you then have to write on it, but there's definitely a lot of that personalization, classic brand, and again, we kind of pay for that brand because it's the brand. You can buy cheaper chocolate, but you want the brand, like, as well as the taste of the chocolate. Cadbury's are just iconic on it. All of the, to your point, the special packs they've done, quality is Cadbury's is roses, isn't it? Is the one, but all of their campaigns have a remembrance. Like some of their advertising is incredible. That
No,
it
it
taps
is. It's
into
very
human
good.
emotion, which is exactly what Classics brand touch our emotions, and that's
Yeah.
why we buy into them, isn't it?
And that's where these retro packs come in and nostalgia. Another one which we've just spoken about already is Burger King. So they had a big rebrand a couple of years back, about 12 months, 18 months ago. I think it was Pearl Fisher who did the Burger King one. But they went for a very retro feel. So I'm guessing Burger King came around about the 70s. But their rebrand of late was a very 70s look about it. 70, very sort of bold, bouncy, rounded fonts, typefaces, strips of colours, all sort of beige, brown, orange hues. Very subtly and cleverly done, but all had this sort of very familiar look about it. And they did actually, their logo was revised from a very perspective, distorted logo into a very simple stamp of a typeface, which looked very much like their 70s logo and the actual packaging. But all this sort of stuff, just it's about those memories, about the right looking at your customer, who's your customer base, and what do they want to, what's going to sell to them, and it is about selling a little bit of history. Do you remember this? And the Burger King one's quite subtle, but beautifully done, very aesthetic, I think. And there are other examples which I know Pepsi of late have done that. They've gone back into very much a kind of an 80s feel about their pack, but still quite modern at the same time.
And it's always by the same iconic agencies that we love, right? Because I think Fanta as well on the Pepsi train. Fanta also did the super retro stuff. Bright, I think, as well. So all of, I mean, you were right before when you said a lot of confectionery, a lot of those when you buy them when you're a teenager. I was thinking of the McDonald's Happy Meal as well, and how that has transcended time and it's evolved and they've removed plastic toys, but it's still quite iconic. You know, Burger King and McDonald's, obviously the two wars against that fast food market, but they've both done it quite differently and captured slightly different markets. I think McDonald's with their golden arches, they capture emotion in a different way, but still really classic, iconic. As soon as you say like Cadbury Purple, the golden arches, you know, the tone of voice with Burger King was very good for that campaign you talked about. And as designers, you go like, oh, the font. You go like, the font is super retro, so you love those kind of things.
And
I bet, I bet in that museum you'd have seen some brands that also you'd go super retro. I was thinking of like Fairy Liquid is always the one that comes to mind for me.
Yeah, good one.
That your mums will remember, that to take it away from just you know, the chocolate and things like that. And even if you go as far back as the original, like the Apple boxes. So even when you think about like, it's probably the only box you still save. Like if we move away from food and drink and stuff, like I was thinking Tiffany green, because the Tiffany boxes, I'm not really a Tiffany girl, but they're still very iconic. People save them. So from a packaging point of view, you knew when it was a Tiffany box. And I was thinking Apple, like I save my MacBook boxes and my iPhone boxes in case you need to sell them, really. But they're still quite iconic. They still kind of show this kind of an art gallery feel to them, which is interesting because all of the packs that you like, they've put them in an art gallery. So I've always said, we've always talked about, I wanted to do advertising for a long time, but actually packaging is something that does stand the test of time. You know, it's a point of advertising at a shelf. You pick it out because it calls to you in some way. And then if it still calls to you 20 years later, like how cool is that something you remember from your childhood ends up in a museum?
It does. The other day, my sister texted me and said, Mark, can you remember that brand, which when we were kids, we'd pour on ice cream and it would crack. And I thought, God, do I remember that? And I immediately thought, the biggest memory to me, and I texted the other day, is, Lee, do you remember this? It was called Ice Magic. Now, Ice Magic, and I'm assuming they had it in the US, because I'm pretty sure it came from the US to the UK. The whole idea was that the marketing campaign, the advertising campaign on television was built, which you may remember, was people skiing down a ski slope, and there was I think there was an avalanche happening in the background, but cracking of ice and then it turned to chocolate. But the idea being that you had this conal bottle-shaped
Like a
vessel,
mountain. Yeah.
which had a cap on it, which looked like wax or something being melted on top, which is basically like this, a snow-capped mountain. But the whole bottle was shaped like a mountain, if you like, but quite ergonomic. It had quite a rough texture to it. So it was obviously, when it was in the freezer, and you took it out the freezer, not in the fridge, sorry, you had a good grip on it. But the textures were involved in it, the shape of it was involved in it, and it was called Ice Magic. And the advertising campaign was just about this chocolate cracking on top of a ball of ice cream.
It was so good. You literally
All those memories coming
it was
back to me. I thought, this is a child, as a 8-year-old child, having this. And I remember even drinking out of the bottle as well. I think it's a great bottle, just a squeeze, as he did. You imagine, I could put it onto ice cream. But those memories as a child, I'm pretty sure it's out. It doesn't exist in its same form, as in bottle form. It's out there already. And the private labels have their own versions of this sort of Ice Magic. I don't know what they call it, cracked chocolate ice cream. But Ice Magic was something that really evoked a lot of emotional memories for me. There must be some packs for you, Lisa, where you think that it's almost the start of my packaging interest. And this is amazing. The texture, the look, the feel, the colors.
Yeah, and it's one that we noticed. So I think format is super important. And I remember Ice Magic as well on the mountain, and you kind of pull it off, and you could grip the cap and pull it off because it was like a mountain. It's amazing. You pour it on your ice cream, and suddenly it was like the chocolate was hard. It went from like, pourable to hard in a heartbeat. So it was super cool. I don't remember the advertising for it, but I very much remember the pack and the structure. And this is how you get your parents to buy into brands, right? Because you go, that one. I want the one that's like a mountain. I don't want the own brand private label one. And I was thinking about that earlier when I thought about Toblerone and the iconic. Yes. They could never change the shape of the box. They can change the structure of the packaging. And they did obviously do the special editions individually wrapped one. But Toblerone is Toblerone. And the other one I thought about was the Terry's chocolate orange, which is a very Christmas thing in England. But I thought, wrapping it shaped like an orange, it's a chocolate orange, and the structure was you had to tap it to unwrap it. Yeah. And the whole campaign was around tap it to unwrap it, so that everyone got a segment. Still exists, still going. Does, yeah. Perhaps they don't have the same advertising because it didn't really matter. But I think if there's something about that packaging, I remember things as a kid like ring pops and push pops that were like lollies that you would have to push up, whistle pops, the ones where you could literally, it was like a little lolly, sweetie, whatever it is, but you could whistle into it. So anything that could do something other than what it was are the ones that I can remember. I was a big sweetie person. I would eat lots of lollies, I guess, as a kid. So always the ones that would it whistles. Oh, it's a ring pop. I can put it on my finger and there's like a sweet on the end of it. Things that would fizz in your mouth. So I think sometimes the novelty of those kind of things, absolutely. And then beyond novelty, when it comes to packaging, it was something that stood out. It's always the Heinz ketchup bottle. There's always things that you remember that make it what it is.
What's quite interesting as well is at the museum, they have courses. I wouldn't say courses. Meetups for different groups of people, and one of the groups of people is patients or elderly with dementia, probably more, dementia. But they have trips where they can walk individuals who perhaps have, who enjoy and probably become more alive, more alert when they start to remember things about their past and their history. And so taking these people with dementia symptoms around this museum where they can actually sort of reminisce and perhaps remember parts of the history. And I just was reading a bit of an advertisement for these groups that sort of meet up at the museum. I thought, what a great idea.
That's a beautiful idea, isn't it? Because even like my mum going like, oh, the Milky Bar Kid, I can remember the Milky Bar Kid. Like obviously it's like before our time or whatever, but just to hear that and how happy someone is when they talk about it. What a great idea. What a great idea.
It is a great idea. But that's what we're talking about now about the... Sorry, Liz.
No, I was going to say, and good for students to see what evokes those memories, and for us as designers to look at all that packaging. Even I think about ergonomic packaging as well. So I think some of the stuff, I worked on the Dewar's jam jar, and how I can remember going to work on that brief and going to meet the brand owners, and they were like, yeah, well, we had this 2-piece lid. It's different to most of them out there. It means you can open it without having to grip the jar. And at the time, we're like, wow, like that's amazing. The amount of people who struggle to open jam jars, but they were like, yeah, we designed it. We just never really thought about it. And they were the only ones on the market like that. But actually, once we did a whole project that was about calling that out to go easy open lid. super
Yeah.
simple as a packaging designer, but functionality of some of these formats is paramount. Like, how do you make it easier for people? Even just, I always think as well about things that you want to finish the last drop of it and you can't. So just there's a lot
Yeah.
of that around
Tubes and the
packaging.
like.
That's the functionality. Like, does it look cool? Yes. Do I want to buy
Yeah.
it? Yes. But actually, does it do the job, or is it easier for me as a consumer to
Yeah.
open? Like, we've seen a lot of it lately where I mean, we talked about Kellogg's before and how that used to be old boxes, and I don't know about there, but I've definitely seen like refill packs of
Yes, a
people
lot of it
because it
happening.
uses a lot less packaging. So a lot of the old classics, how are they reinventing themselves to live with sustainability, is an interesting space at the moment.
Are you noticing as well a lot of brands going back into glass, or at least calling out the fact that their glass products are more sustainable because the glass as a
Yeah.
production format and a
Yes.
manufacturing format is a lot more, what would you
And it is to a point, and I'm sure if Ian, my designer, who is all over sustainability, is listening to this, he will call me out in the studio tomorrow and go, it is better, but in some ways it's not, because it's only
Yes,
better if you reuse it. Because
if
if
you're
you
recycling, of
melt
course.
it back down and then reform it, a bit like the whole plastic trend, it's actually not as sustainable. But if you reuse it and refill it, absolutely it is. So
Yeah, no, I
it's an
agree.
interesting one. It kind of borderlines on the greenwashing. It's like the whole Tetra, right? Like, put things in Tetra
Yeah,
packs, they're recyclable. And I was like, well, they are, but only if you send them back to Tetra.
yeah.
The carbon neutrality of it. So I think, and also glass is heavier. So the transport costs of transporting glass are heavier. So I think I mean, it's definitely on shelf. It just feels more premium. I think glass feels more premium, which is why a lot of
Hmm.
people are doing it.
So again, going on the nostalgia thing, a lot of these brands, the brands that have stood the test of time, those brands which have been around for multiple centuries, are the ones that have adapted to socioeconomic climates, for example, and what's making them have to change. They're having to change their packaging format from plastic to paper, maybe paper to glass, and whatever it might be, just to make sure that they are still able to trade and trade efficiently and economically. I'm trying to think of you touched on Coca-Cola still having the glass bottles their icon, even though I'm sure that most of their products are sold in plastic bottles and cans. The glass bottle is still a popular format, and it's used as their icon within their iconography. They haven't dropped that.
No, and I think as part of as we move towards kind of a summary and towards the end, I think it's a real opportunity right now. This nostalgia and retro trend is actually a really good opportunity for any brand, even if you're a new challenger brand. I saw something the other day that someone presented to me, and it was bone broth, which you will relate to very well because we went through our keto phase and our carnivore phases. But what they've done is, because glass is heavier, because the lids on the glass jar of bone broth made it heavier and plastic lid was less sustainable, they had repackaged this brand and put it into a, so it was like a can of drink, and obviously way more recyclable. You can crush it when it's done, but they put bone broth into the can. So I would say also for any brands out there that are going, how do I go back nostalgia? Well, actually, cans are quite nostalgic to us. We think of that moment of opening a can. Think about a category out of your category and what memories can you bring into your category. Bone broth is kind of, it's old, but it's new. How do you make it cool? It was an amazing revelation to me when someone went, oh yeah, so they've done bone broth, but they put it in a can. You're like,
Yeah,
wow, what a great idea. So if you're a brand, think about things people remember and treasure. Can you make something that's healthy, look like a lolly? And there's a lot here
yeah,
where people are doing like healthy lollies, but they've done in retro style. There's a brand called Fun Day, and they've done it like old lolly jar type design, but it's sugar free and all that kind of stuff. So I think tapping into our old memories, and sometimes those things weren't as healthy. So if
yeah,
healthy things are tapping into the memory, what a great opportunity to kind of,
yeah.
kind of bring old into new. I love this collision idea of reminding of us what was, but realizing the future is exciting
I think
and
as long
new.
as it's got a purpose, as long as the pack format you're choosing has a purpose and a reason, as long as it's not just for shelf impact value, if it's not just going, oh, it's going to look different on shelf, if you've got a can amongst the, I don't know what bone broth previously sold in
Yeah,
plastic
no,
containers.
it's purely a
As long as it has,
sustainability.
yeah, exactly, and reasoning, and you can back it up with information that's going to help your brand. And sometimes it might be a cheaper format, a more cost-effective way of. And I know with cans, for example, you could pasteurize them, seal them, so that you're going to extend the shelf life, so potentially more economically viable as well. Lisa, I've loved this. I love just delving into packs of the past, that little part of our brains that loves to think about our childhood and those happy memories. And those happy memories, whacking that Heinz tomato bottle, trying to get that last bit of Toblerone out the end of the tube, those sort of things, they are great, but they are things that sort of form the way in which we buy products today, and why we would buy Toblerone, or why we would go to Burger King and enjoy a burger there and spread
Absolutely.
it.
And definitely what we'll do as we launch and release this particular episode is we should probably throw up a bit of a blog on LinkedIn and put some visuals of some of these packs that we've talked about. Let's find some ice magic and put it in there. I know we've been doing our research over the past few days. So, and it's interesting if you look into some of the newer platforms like TikTok and Snapchat, you'll see people going, I remember this. Have you seen this? And so it gets people talking. We're talking now. We're going, oh, can you remember when? So it connects people in a really nice way. So I think definitely let's dig out some of the things that we've talked about. How about we end, Mark?
With TikTok, and you see those kids looking back and say, do you remember these packs? They're talking about stuff that was 10 years ago. I was like, oh God, that's like yesterday. What are you talking about?
Still got that bottle of ice magic in the fridge.
Yeah.
So give me your top 2 retro brands then, Mark, as we kind of come towards wrapping up the episode. What are your top 2 nostalgic brands?
My top 2 retro brands. Crikey. I know they're still out there, but again, I've spoken about them earlier on. It's Monster Munch packs. I love Monster Munch packs. Just because I remember as a child enjoying those bloody massive, big, fat monster feed crisps and the funny little aliens that would stump around on the stage and on the TV adverts. So yeah, the Monster Munch and Ice Magic. Just because it's a recent one I've looked at and so I thought, I've forgotten about that. How about you, Lise? Top 2.
Do you remember when those Monster Munch packs were made from such a thing that you could put them in the oven and they would shrink?
Yes.
And you could make them into a badge. Probably if you're a girl, maybe not if you're a boy.
Little Monster Mac came in, it's all distorted bit of plastic. I'm sure
I think it would probably be, I was a big Milky Bar Buttons fan. So when they started making Milky Bar into buttons, those packets you could buy with a Milky Bar animation on the front. And the same as your similar kind of vibe to your Monster Munch, I love Cheetos, which I think might have been an American brand, but the little Cheeto character, it was always linked to a character, I think, or the adverts that went on it. Tony the Tiger and Frosties. There's just something about those kind of, I love them. They were so bad for you, all of these things. When you look at them now, it's amazing we're not all diabetic. But I just think those brands, and you remember as a kid being allowed to have them, they're the ones that stand in my mind.
Completely agree. Just before we go, I think that I'm watching things like on television, like Stranger Things, or even if I'm rewatching E.T., and where they're in a kitchen and they open up a kitchen cupboard and you start to see all these brands on the shelves. Oh, the memories, 3-piece drinking can, where there's a whole different ring pull on top of a can, the way the can was constructed, just those sorts of memories, and I love them. So yeah, definitely recommend going to Museum of Brands just to evoke some memories of the past, happy memories, worthwhile.
We'll drop the address and the link into the show notes when we run this. Love going down memory lane with you, Mark.
Yeah, you too, Lise. Have a good one.
Thank you. See ya.